Good afternoon. Welcome to the first ever edition of the Scarlet and Gray Coach Conley's Corner online at NBC4i.com and being broadcast throughout the state today through our affiliates in Dayton, in Wheeling, and Youngstown. We're so glad you've joined us here. This is Coach Bill Conley, former Ohio State player, former Ohio State coach, assistant coach with Earl Bruce, Jim Tressel, literally everybody who's ever been a coach you worked with at some point.
Yeah, now you can get to the 19th century.
Yeah, pretty recent.
Around a while.
We're thrilled you're joining us here. We're trying something new today, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So what we're going to do is take your Ohio State football questions for the next half hour. Whatever you want to know about, the information that you're going to need to get to us is right there on your screen. At Twitter, at JerodNBC4. That's Jerod NBC4. You can get me your questions right there, and we'll get them on to Coach. Also on Facebook, Jerod Smalley. You can find me there. It's the NBC4 with the one with the check mark. You can leave me a message right there. We have the live stream going up, a few things we're going to be getting to this afternoon. So the first thing we'll do, again, my email, jsmalley@wcmh.com. You want to send me an email, we'll get it that way as well to Coach Conley over the next half hour. So we asked for a few questions in advance, Coach, and we wanted to start back here with what we had come up through Twitter. Philip sent us this note, and it's something that came up today with Urban Meyer in the news conferences getting ready for Minnesota this week. Why is Urban so concerned about offense when they are throwing the ball so well? And I think what he's talking about is balance on offense. The fact that they're only running it for about, 200 yards a game?
Right.
But they're still incredible on offense right now, third in the country in passing. So take us through the balance of balance, why it's so critical to have that run-pass balance and why that's such an emphasis for Urban this week.
And that's a great question. The obvious reason is there's going to be some time in the future of the season where it could be bad weather, the offense could start off slowly, so you need to be able to run the football.
Right.
Now, offenses also understand, though, they take what the defense gives you. And if defenses are allowing you to throw the ball, great % chance of completing the pass, and then you do that. So that's number one. The second thing is that you got to be able to run the ball in short yardage. So I'm sure the Buckeyes are working on some different short yardage packages. So when it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, you got something to go to. Some run, obvious, a lot of run, and some play action pass.
Yeah, there's a lot there. It's a difficult thing to understand maybe if you're having so much success. Why are you tinkering with success? But I think there's a number of elements related to offense that aren't just about what you've seen through 6 games. It's about what you might see in the next 6 games. If you have poor weather, if Dwayne is injured if there's some issue and Tate Martell comes into the game and you're less confident throwing the ball down the field, you still got to run an offense. And obviously all of that plays into a coach's mind, right?
Yeah, I mean, what you have to do things down the road you haven't been doing so far. And so change up some formations a little bit. Maybe go to some unbalanced look. Things will make the defense adjust to what you do. And if it takes them a while to make that adjustment, you can maybe find a soft spot, a weakness in their defense, especially running the football. Undeniably
so. I think there's a couple curiosities, and we'll get to those throughout the show here. Couple things that came up here. Coach, already, our buddy Billy Griffin.
Billy
Griffin
yes,
sent me a note here. He's very excited because Billy Griffin was a former intern of ours at NBC4. Billy was a quarterback for Coach at Ohio Dominican, maybe 6-7 years ago?
Yeah, not too long ago. He went to Watterson High School.
Right.
Tremendous athlete.
Yep.
And a very talented, very versatile person.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a comedian.
An actor now.
Yeah, he can play the guitar. He can sing. Billy Griffin's a great young man.
So he just wanted me to ask you what product you use in your hair.
First of all, axle grease if it holds.
Actual grease.
Axle
grease.
Axle grease. Yeah. And if it holds, I'm fine. If not, then we have to go to something more drastic.
That is a thing of beauty, my man. So anyway, we got those opportunities for you right now at JerodNBC4. You can email me, jsmalley@wcmh.com, and of course go to Facebook, and you can get us there. If you had a question for Coach Conley, we'll address it here. So a couple things that I know that are pressing for Ohio State defensively. People have asked us these questions all week about when are they going to limit the big play. They have had real trouble not only on the ground. They've given up a pass play of more than 90 yards.
Right.
They've given up 3 runs of more than 78 yards for touchdowns this season, Bill.
Yeah.
In the broad view, what is happening with the big play on defense? Is it it seems like you could point to something different every time, but schematically, what's happening there in your eyes?
Well, there's something that's common on all those big plays, and that's man coverage. So what happens when you play press man coverage, which we're playing a lot of, usually with a free safety, then what happens, you're locked on to the receiver. So if they release outside, you got to stay on their inside. You have to turn your back, of course, to the football and run with the man. You can't look back and run at the same time. You'll get burnt. So we run with those guys, man, and then if the ball breaks short of you, whether run or, like in the case of TCU, through the line of scrimmage, can go a long way because then you have to turn and pivot back and converge on the football. So it's a combination of those things, but primarily man coverage can result in big plays in terms of leverage on the football.
And there's a follow-up to that. People have been asking, so why play man coverage? You know, what's the benefit of man coverage if you can't play it effectively? What is it Ohio State's trying to accomplish by playing that style of defense that helps them overall?
Well, first of all, it gives you added pressure on the quarterback. You have an extra man to rush. So that's probably, so if you get a quarterback, then what you do is you rush the guy. So that's one of the advantages of man coverage. Second, we've got athletes, tremendous athletes that are very agile, versatile, mobile, they can run.
Hostile.
And but when you run with those guys man to man, it's tough for the quarterback to make a completion because they have to throw pretty much over top of you. So there's some definite advantages. But again, I think the key is you got to mix those things up. There's different types of man coverage. It's not always just man free. You can play 2 deep, man under. You can play 0 coverage, which is man, straight man.
Yeah.
So mix it up. But here's the other part. Our defensive backs are young. They're good athletes. They're young. They've only played a few games as starters. So therefore, the communication's got to get better. The overall performance of the little techniques have to get better, and we will get better.
And one of the other social media comments I saw this week was about how pass rush affects that. And Urban actually addressed that yesterday at his news conference, talking about how with Nick Bosa out of the lineup, and again, we have no idea when Nick's going to be back playing, when he's not there, the pressure it's putting on everybody else on that defense to get to the quarterback. There were 3 sacks against Indiana. They really ramped that up in the second half and played much better. And as a result of that, the defense played better. So can you explain a little bit of how the folks up front causing havoc helps every level of the defense?
Yeah, first of all, you get in the face of the quarterback. If you can push the pocket, what we call push the pocket back into the face of the quarterback, he can't take a good stride and release the ball. And also, here's the other thing, it forces him to get rid of the ball sooner. Now, the downfall of that, if we're bringing a lot of guys, they'll run a screen or something like that. And now we got to make plays in the open field. So that's the trade-off between putting pressure and not.
Yep. Something else we were talking about this week that we're going to address later on today, the tight end position. It's the position every year that people are always asking about, hey, are they going to throw? Is this the year they throw to the tight end? This is not the year that they're throwing to the tight end. They've caught 2 touchdowns of the 26 touchdowns they've thrown this year total between Dwayne and Tate. They've thrown 26 touchdowns, 2 of them to tight ends. They've thrown 165 passes this year, receptions, I should say, had 165 completions, 5 to tight ends.
Some days, some years, that's a good percentage.
Yeah.
But no, here's what it is. First of all, tight ends, always, and I coach tight ends, so I know what I'm talking about here. They and their parents always are calling for more passes. So let's face it. And that's never going to change. So that's going to happen. And we have very good, talented tight ends. But part of the thing, we have so many good wide receivers. They can't double coverage anybody out there at the wide end spots. Yeah. So, you get them in space and you make plays. But here's the other part of it. Sometimes you have to leave the tight end for extra pass protection. Yeah. And that, that has to be done. But I think what you'll see some more tight end screens in the future. I think you'll see some more tight end delays in the future.
Email message from Troy here asking about Urban Meyer's health. Do you think he's okay? That is in reference to what we saw a week ago where late in the game, Urban went down on a knee, rubbing his head. And it was an issue. He's had this history of cysts in his brain. Goes back most of his adult life, actually. It's called an arachnoid cyst. He had surgery on it 4 years ago. And at times, if you watch Urban on the sideline, you will see him rub his head. Actually, I think it's the left side of his head. You'll see him rub And then, unfortunately, during the Indiana game, he dropped down to a knee because it hurt that bad. He had that bad a headache. He said the remedy for it was to basically take medicine, and he's okay shortly thereafter. He's been dealing with that for years. I know you've known Coach a long time. Yeah. Can you explain what he's actually dealing with, the difficulty he has with it, and how he's managing it through games? Because I think people, understandably so, are genuinely concerned. You see the head coach on his knees on the sideline in pain. You're wondering what's going on. I'd imagine that you're understandably upset if you see that. I get that part.
Absolutely.
What do you know about that?
Well, first of all, he's had it for a while, like you said, especially back in Florida is noticeable. The doctors know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. You know, if it's dangerous for him to be out there, I'm sure they would tell him. But he's a football coach. He likes being on that sideline. Here's the thing about it. It's very stressful. And that's continual. When a game starts, and that's not counting pregame and during the week,
right.
When that game starts, the pressure on the head football coach is tremendous. Every play is a lifetime of its own. And, you know, there's things you see on the sideline that you like, you don't like, possibilities of things to do. So all that is going through his mind all the time. So it's just a matter of a pressure job. It's kind of like me over a 6-foot putt. A lot of pressure.
Yeah. But you know, what's interesting about that, though, is that that's a common trait among coaches, is the stress they deal with and how they deal with it. In your coaching career, how did you deal with those, like you're getting ready to play Michigan, and you know that it means the world. Yeah. You coached against Michigan, but 20 times? How did you manage that stress? How did you handle that and get yourself out there to perform? Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough to relax. And I don't care what coach you're talking about. Before a big game, you're going to be nervous. Yeah. You're really going to be nervous. But what you do as coaches, you try to stay in as good a shape as you can in a profession that is a lot of hours watching film and things like that. So we always, all the coaches always gave us time to work out and, you know, try to relieve some stress that way. But it's kind of an individually based thing. Some guys got to stay more active. Some guys got to do something else to take their mind off of it. So it's really an individual thing. But there's no doubt about it.
Yep.
You know, you say coaches get paid a lot of money today. That is true. But I can't think of many occupations where there's that much stress.
Yeah, money, you know, I think we read a lot into money and call it an explanation for things, right, or an excuse for things. Well, you make this much money, you shouldn't have blank. And that's certainly not the case because, you know, whether he was paid $7 million a year, whether he is paid, you know, $7,000 a year, he's going to care either way.
Right.
And when you care about something, you stress out about something, and that's, you know, that's obviously
the issue there. High school coaches the same way.
No doubt, because they're getting paid millions, you know.
Millions.
Absolutely. Email question here about the Big Ten race. Who's the favorite in the Big Ten other than Ohio State? Which I think is a really good question because I don't know if we know that yet. We might get closer to the answer Saturday night when Wisconsin plays at Michigan. We might get a better answer there.
I think it's between one of those two. I really do. Because those teams all will be better at the end of the season than they are right now. We know where we are. It wouldn't surprise me if the Big Ten East doesn't get decided even before the Michigan game.
Okay.
I think we're that good shape schedule-wise. But you got a team like Michigan State who really has not played up their potential, but can any week.
Of course they can.
So, you know, but I really think the second, Penn State might be the second best.
They're really good.
Because they're a really good football team. But, you know, if we keep winning, they're pretty much out of the thing. But really, the four teams that behind us, or I think in terms of quality, are Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan, and maybe Michigan State.
At that fringe four, depending on well,
yeah.
So Ohio State plays up at Michigan State in a few weeks. That's like November 10th, I think, is the date of that game. That, I think, will be a really challenging game. It'll be cold in East Lansing. East Lansing, man, those games have been tough for Ohio State in the past. So even if the team may not be highly regarded, that is still going to be a difficult environment. They'll have a veteran quarterback, Lewerke, there. So there are some concerns for Ohio State in that matchup. What's your thought about Michigan so far? Since the Notre Dame loss, they have come alive a little bit, it looks like, and they're the number one defense in the country, so that's no issue there.
Well, their new quarterback's playing better, you know, and they're really coming together, it looks to me, as a football team. So they, you know, if they improve each week like we expect them to do, that'll be a Donnybrook against them. It always is.
Oh, always is. It'll be in Columbus this year. That'll be the The fun part about that, I love the Ohio State-Michigan game in Columbus, the way that Columbus responds to it. One of my favorite stories is my first Ohio State-Michigan game, 2004. I was standing on the field before the game. I was so excited. And I was standing across from me to you from a Michigan trombone player. And they took the field for pregame. It was pretty quiet. It was all right. And 04, you have to think Buckeyes weren't very good in 04. That was a 4-loss team. And Michigan came in heavily favored. Braylon Edwards was their big player. And 04, the band starts to take the field for Michigan. And the crowd erupts in anger and fury. And I never heard that trombone player play a note. I never heard the band. It was yay far. I never heard them. Those people were so angry. I mean, it was a really impressive thing.
There is electricity on the field.
Yeah.
Every game. You know, you talked the Michigan game. You know, this week, you know, it's the 50th anniversary of the 1968 national championship team.
That's right.
And of course, what a lot of people remember that were around back then, or they've heard through their relatives and stuff. Big game that year against Michigan. Ohio State won 50-14. 5-0 to 14.
That's right.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's one of those Woody Hayes games. Why'd you go for 2? Because I couldn't go for 3 scenarios. That's the kind of stuff he was legendary for. Let's get into a little bit about another question here from email about defense and about, you know, this one. We'll expand this because we talked about the big play earlier. We'll talk more about one-on-one coverage, man-to-man coverage, and how the Buckeyes are trying to improve in man-to-man coverage. Should they continue to chase playing man outside at corner, or is it a team that you think might be better off playing a little bit more zone like they did a little bit against Indiana?
You know, I think, again, it's a mix. I think you can run some press all the time, but I think you have to play some off coverage too. You can play man coverage and being off and all that stuff, but I think you'll see more combination of different types of man coverage and also some zone. But a lot of things the offense dictates too by their formation and by their motion to make sure you get covered down. So then that's part of the whole thing too about our defensive secondary. They are a young group who haven't played together very long. They're still trying to communicate together and pre-snap awareness and all those things.
Sure.
So we got, and I was saying athletes back there just need time to get a little better.
Yeah. A couple defensive concerns for this week. We know that Malik Harrison left the game along with Jonathan Cooper against Indiana. We don't know the precise extent of their injuries, but we know that neither player is a likely player to be available for Saturday against Minnesota. Might be a game time decision for both those guys, and those are two significant pieces, especially in the case of Jonathan Cooper, because he's the next defensive end in after Nick Bosa. So with Bosa out, you've got Chase Young and Cooper at those ends. If Cooper can't play, you're probably looking at either Ja'Shawn Cornell or the freshman, Tyreek Smith from Cleveland, who had a sack last week. They might be doing a bulk of the work in that game. And again, if Tyreek gets out there, the lineman across from him might be a 400-pound freshman lineman from Minnesota named Daniel Falele, playing his first collegiate start. If you're playing a lineman who's 400 pounds, Bill, what do you do?
First of all, you make sure during the game he does not fall on you.
No kidding.
All right, because they might
Personal
not find
safety.
him for 2 weeks. So you got to use your speed. Work the edges, say his coaches. Work the pads, inside, outside, but don't ever get face up. You're not going to power rush this guy.
Right.
And if you try to run around him too far around him, you'll be tired by fourth quarter. So you got to get to his edge quick and get around the guy.
Yep. Minnesota's 3-2 this season. They have been pretty good defensively. The unfortunate setback for them was the loss of Antoine Winfield Jr. Of course, you Buckeye fans, you know Antoine Winfield. Lost to injury for the season, so he's not going to be back. And that was a huge difference maker, not only on defense, but on special teams. A really talented player. So he's not there Saturday. They're still a top 25 ranked defense, but last week they gave up 48 points at home to Iowa. And that was a concern. Iowa moved the ball pretty well. They've had some other injuries on defense. They can still rush the passer, though, Bill. So this is a defense that can still give you some problems.
Yeah, they got great defensive end, the name of Corey Coughlin. And he has 5 of their 8 sacks. Okay. So they do have a decent front. And the 2 inside tackles are both over 300 pounds. So they're big guys. But they have trouble getting heat on a quarterback all day long. They've only had 8, like I say, sacks for the whole year. So again, one of the problems with the injuries they've had is that they're still trying to find out the right combination in the positions.
And we were talking earlier about the youth on that team. They've got, what, some 30-plus guys who are
33 freshmen in the two deep. Ooh. That's almost unheard of.
That's a lot to deal with when you talk about getting a team ready to go play in Ohio Stadium. It's funny, P.J. Fleck, their head coach, was saying this week that he wants to bring that team on Friday into the stadium for a walkthrough just so they can see it.
Yeah. Just
so they can kind of kick the nerves out a little bit, like, oh, okay, we're playing here tomorrow. They've never been anywhere like that. I mean, that will be, they haven't played, the teams haven't played in 3 years. So
right.
there is a newness to this, I would imagine, for a head coach. You're taking that many young players into a place like Ohio Stadium?
Well, first of all started last week during practice, because I can promise you what they did. They had loudspeakers out on the practice field, drumming up as much noise as possible, because much like we had to face against Penn State, they've got to learn how to communicate in that hostile environment. So they'll be using different signals, hand signals and everything else, so that they can snap the ball at the right time. So that's going to be a huge thing for them in the stadium. And you can describe Ohio Stadium when the crowd's riled up, but you don't really know it till you experience it.
No doubt.
It'll be probably the biggest crowd they've ever played in, almost all their football players.
I would imagine every single one of them is going to be thinking that. It's going to be a different kind of atmosphere. So again, if you want to ask Coach Conley a question, feel free to hit us right here on Twitter at JaredNBC4. We've got about 10 minutes left in the show. You can email. A lot of folks have emailed me, and that's perfectly fine. J. Smalley at WCMH.com. Also on Facebook, Jerod Smalley, NBC4. You'll see the check mark there, and you can catch us there. Appreciate everybody who's watching us today in Wheeling with WTRF and Dayton, WDTN. Very happy to have you all along and hope you enjoy our coverage all season long. We'll come back for the rest of the season, and we'll answer your Buckeye questions as we dive into the real thick of this season. So, curious about tomorrow. With Ohio State and their plan for tomorrow, I'm fascinated to see how they show up for this game. You're favored by 30. You have a lot in terms of build-up, interest in Dwayne Haskins potentially as a Heisman Trophy candidate. People are interested in the Buckeyes. They're ranked 3rd in the country. There are some injuries. There are some real concerns defensively, and they haven't run the balls effectively. How seriously do you think they show up Saturday?
I think very seriously, because they've been called out by their head coach. And you always respond a little bit better when you get called out by the head coach. So I look for Ohio State to do some different things to establish a running attack. But let's face it, you're not going to take the ball away from Dwayne Haskins throwing, because he is so good. You're watching a legend in the making, really. He is that good. And even the opposing team, they're not going to realize how good he is till they see him zip that ball going 100 miles an hour right by their ear.
Yeah.
So you got to do what you're doing well, but I'm sure there'll be a concentrated effort on running the football tomorrow.
A couple things in relation to Dwayne Haskins this week, because so much of the attention has been focused on Dwayne's season so far through 6 games. He's #1 in the country in passing touchdowns. He has 25 of them. They're 3rd as a team in passing offense. He's been extraordinary. He's top 5 in passing yards. He's top 10 in, I think, 6 different passing categories in the country right now. He is statistically the best quarterback in America. He's been better than Tua at Alabama in a lot of those statistical categories, and you know how well Tua has played. So he's been marvelous. And that's the issue you start to run into is if you take the ball out of his hands, does the offense run the same? Because this offense has been humming. It has been terrifying for opponents so far. Granted, many of those opponents are outmatched. But when they had to have points in the 4th quarter at Penn State, loudest, toughest environment they will ever play in, that offense couldn't be stopped, Bill. And it's because he had the ball in his hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's the mark of a great team, a great offense, and a mark of a great quarterback. What do you do in pressure situations? And they have responded. His leadership has responded. He's a guy that really the team circles the wagons around, and they really respect him. He's a guy that has great confidence in himself and in his supporting cast, his teammates around him. So it's a perfect offensive situation. And like we said, they can't guard just 1 or 2 receivers. We got a whole stable full of those guys to the other team.
Well, oddly enough, a related email question here about the importance of Tate Martell. So We were talking about this earlier today about what Tate Martell needs to be for Ohio State. So if, let's say, Ohio State gets a nice lead on Saturday, how important is it that Tate gets in the game?
Very important. Very important. You know, today in the world of all college transfers and redshirt rules and things like that, you're always recruiting quarterbacks. Now, he's a guy that needs as much playing time as possible because he's not the same makeup of a quarterback as Dwayne Haskins. The coaches it's a fine line they got to walk, Jerod. They got to walk a fine line between, you know, running the offense we're running and doing the things he does well. So it's kind of a hybrid type of offense you'll see with him. But the most important thing, he needs to get in for playing time, game experience.
It has to change.
Absolutely.
You're right. I mean, for him to be at his most successful, and therefore the offense be their most successful, the offense does have to change a little bit with Tate's skill set. He's a phenomenal runner of the ball. He does a great job. He runs read option very well. You don't want to lose that skill. Quite obviously, you know, Ohio State tried to run that a couple times with Dwayne the last couple of weeks, and you're going, don't do that. I know that you got to keep it on. You put it on tape. I know that, but that did not.
Well, and here's the thing: Tate Martell needs playing time with our starters. Yeah. You know, if it's a wholesale substitution, you don't gain as much because the other guys aren't quite as good as the first team guys. You know, they're talented, but you might not get the same type of pass protection, same type of run blocking as you do as the first team. That's why they're first teamers. Yeah. So he needs some work with the starters.
It'll be interesting to follow how they develop that through the year because you want to have him ready to go. Right. I'll remind you of a year ago when Ohio State played at Michigan, third quarter, J.T. Barrett, you know, unbeknownst to us, had been hurt before the game by a cameraman and knocked his knee out of alignment, had to come from the game in the third quarter. And on trots Dwayne Haskins. He had enough backup experience through the year. The games with Illinois, with Michigan State, where he played quite a bit, Nebraska, where he was able to get reps in big environments. And when he came in that game, he shined. He was phenomenal. Immediately went down the field and scored. Fourth quarter, Ohio State dominated the game. Haskins had the experience to take over. And I think that's the concern. If they run into that situation, does Tate Martell have the experience yet? I'm not sure he does just yet.
No, and there are two different types of athletes, too. Let's face it, Haskins had the experience last year. He always was a good thrower. He could always throw the ball if you need him to throw. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, Tate Martell, he's under 6 foot tall, so he can't see through or over some of those onrushing linemen. He's got to slide his feet and find a window in there, or take advantage of his speed and make a run pass outside.
Well, final couple minutes here in our show. Again, we'll come back each week, so if you have a message for Coach Conley, you don't have to wait for show day. You can message us anytime during the week, and we'll make sure we read that for Coach Conley as we get on to Thursday afternoons. What do you expect out of Ohio State Thursday? A score? What type of performance do you expect to see?
Well, I think we'll score a lot, and I think we'll score early. I think we have to do that to accomplish all the things that we've talked about. You know, get our starters off the field, put the game away. This is not a Minnesota team that plays catch-up football very well. They just don't have the explosive power to do that. And, of course, let's correct some of the things we have got to get corrected. Not as many penalties. We can't have as many penalties. We had, I think, 8 last week and something like 10 or 11 the week before. Too many crucial penalties in situations where we got to, you know, get off the field first, our defense, keep the ball going. If we're on offense. So keep those drives going.
And one more, it's a Facebook comment here on our Buckeye Nation page talking about the defense. Defense not acceptable. A lot of folks have given that sort of theory about the first 6 games of the season. The defense isn't a championship level defense. Bill, do you see a championship level in their future if provided Nick Bosa's back and they're healthy?
Well, I think I do see it, but we're going to have improvement.
Yeah.
Again, the athletes are there. If you didn't have athletes, it's impossible. But Urban Meyer has basically called the defense out and say, we have got to play better because if we don't, we can't take this the whole way. We absolutely can't. There's going to be some game in the near future or games where the offense simply is not going to be able to put up that many points.
Very true.
Again, it could be weather or a lot of different things. So we've got to improve in some basic areas. But again, we've got the talent if we do that.
So one last thing for you. We'll be here all week. If you're locally in Columbus, tomorrow night, Friday night, 7 o'clock, NBC4, Coach Conley and I will have Scarlet and Gray for you. 30 minutes on the Ohio State game to come with Minnesota Saturday. We'll also be talking about a few of the other things that are happening around the Ohio State campus. And this week, it's a really cool week because of the 68th anniversary, the 50-year anniversary of one of the great teams in Ohio State history. They're coming back this weekend for the reunion here. Rex Kern, all those greats will be back here. The Super Sauce from 68. You guys, you know those guys. You were a freshman on that team.
I was a freshman on that team. And, man, I'll tell you what, the only bad thing was you had to be a scout team for those guys.
Oh.
They were pretty good. But there's a tremendously talented team. You know, they, of course, beat Michigan, like I said, 50-14, went to the Rose Bowl, who had the Heisman Trophy winner and O.J. Simpson, and beat them. It came back really well in the second half. And some of the greatest Buckeyes ever. We're just talking about pass interceptions, you know, one of the areas that we've been talking about. You know, Mike Sensabaugh, who was on that team, was a safety. He's a career interception leader for Ohio State. He had 22 in his 3 years. And those guys could only play 3 years back then because freshmen were ineligible.
Couldn't play as a freshman. We were talking about that earlier. The Buckeyes only have 4 interceptions this year, which is not a great number, but that number certainly can go a long way depending on how opponents try to attack Ohio State for the remainder of the year. That'll do it. We've wrapped up our time here for our first Coach Conley's Corner webcast. You join us each week. Thursday afternoon, we'll come to you at 2 o'clock, and we'll get you set for the Buckeye game to come, the Buckeye season at large. This man has the answer. Trust me. Thanks for joining us all across the great state of Ohio. Have yourself a great Thursday. We'll see you.
Go Bucks.